full tilt, we build about 30,000 houses a year in New Zealand, that's new houses. So we can build about 2% of the stock of houses a year. But if everybody wants a bigger house all at once because we're all richer, prices go up until the new supply slowly meets the all at once big change in demand. That's very, very different from an ordinary market because we can't import much of this stuff. We have to build the houses in New Zealand using largely local builders and local developers and so forth, and there are real supply constraints.
We've seen over time a shortage of builders, shortage of skilled workers. New Zealand has quite a cyclical building industry. When the downturn comes, people go to Australia. Then the upturn comes and we don't have the builders. So that's been a long history in New Zealand, 20, 30 years, where that happens.
In addition to a shortage in construction workers, we seem to be fairly limited in what kind of houses we can build.
For the past 2 decades, the construction industry has scaled to that which has been allowed by zoning and planning and council incentives. That which has been allowed is building in drips and drabs, a lot of do-ups and reno, a little bit of subdivide a lot to put a second house on the lot, not too much for terraced housing or townhouses. That's not the construction industry that you need to be building tens of thousands of houses per city per year.
If you think about materials, labour, land, it's land that's by far the biggest contributor to the increase in house prices that we've seen.
So how can there be a land shortage in a country similar to the size of the UK, but with only a fraction of their population? In New Zealand, available land for construction is set by council through zoning. Zoning determines where you can or can't build, and also the type of house you can build. This brings us to the next question. If there's still enough available land, why would councils zone areas in such a way that restricts the construction of new houses?
You have to look to council's incentives. We have set a system in New Zealand where it's just a recipe for ongoing angst and conflict between central and local government. Central government wants population and economic growth because it's good for the country, and it's good for central government tax revenues. More people are here paying taxes, central government gets a higher income tax take. If companies are thriving because you've got a really productive city, more company taxes for central government. Like, all of those are like awesome things, right, for central government. They love those. Council budgets don't quite work that way. They don't really see much revenue side in population growth. What they do see are massive infrastructure costs and a whole pile of hassle in dealing with existing residents who see no particular benefits to them of urban growth, but a lot of perceived personal costs.
Councillors know that they have to keep the house owners happy, and of course any housing shortage results in an increase in the house price. So why on earth would a city councillor vote to make housing easily available when their votes come from people who want to make housing more difficult?
So the votes of those who can block change will always be overweighted compared to those who never get a chance to be there. And the way that we've set up the finances around it, councils don't really have anything that they can use to sort of pay off the losers. So if you're an economist, you're always trying to find what they call Caldor-Hicks moves, right? Because at least in principle, if the benefits exceed the costs, there's some way of compensating the losers so that nobody's made worse off. How can councils do this? All right, well, actually they can't. They don't get another big revenue stream that comes with more residents coming in. Central government gets a whole pile more revenue. Local councils get a whole pile of headaches. So of course they set rules that restrict growth. It's entirely in their interest to do so. They'd be mugs not to. Right now, when they go into these town hall meetings, they've got nothing to offer. Just vociferous opposition in the room by people who were scared of change, lots of aspects of change, and didn't see any benefit in it for them. Some of those concerns, I think, are absolutely real, but Other concerns are entirely illegitimate. Some of them were frankly racist around which types of people might move in if there were apartments or townhouses. All of these reasons that people then have to say no because they can see how this will hurt them, and there's nothing that council can really do to assuage that.
We found quite early on that it was very difficult for developers to get a big enough area to make a large subdivision because the land was just being regulated. They couldn't use land that would otherwise be good for housing.
In terms of land, one of the problems is transport. New Zealand has a terrible rail system. Our trains go at 50 or 60 kilometres an hour. Trains overseas go 250 kilometres an hour. To get from Wellington to Palapalaumu is 50 minutes on the train. It's 50 kilometres. And it's not cheap either. So the transport network becomes really important in determining whether suburbs further out are good substitutes for the suburbs closer that you might want to live in. So if you have a rotten transport network, you're going to pay a big premium to live places that are convenient to the amenities that you want.
So far, we've talked about how we got here, how supply was not catching up with demand, resulting in less affordable housing for more and more people.